Hello and welcome to the Online Advocates Confidentiality course. My name is Breezy Boone and I work for the Minnesota Coalition for Battered Women. This course is designed to teach you all about the confidentiality rules that you are required to follow as a domestic violence advocate. Before we jump into the course, if you are not familiar with the online Blackboard site, please go view the intro to the site video that is contained in the course materials. Okay, so a bit of an overview of how this course will be set up. It will be 5 weeks long, and each week should take you about an hour to an hour and a half to complete. During this first week, we are really just going to provide an introduction to the course and the concept of confidentiality, and teach you the basic confidentiality rule that you are required to follow. In the following weeks, we will dive deeper into this rule and the specific exceptions in it, as well as various situations that often come up for domestic violence advocates. You will also have an opportunity to complete practice questions that will help you master the confidentiality rules. Okay, so diving into week 1, you might be wondering why confidentiality even matters. Why is it even important in your job as a domestic violence advocate? Well, confidentiality is very important and probably one of the most important aspects of your job for a few reasons. First of all, there are certain confidentiality rules that you are required to follow so that your program receives funding. If you do not follow these rules, you put your program at risk of losing funding, which you do not want to happen. Secondly, following these confidentiality rules better serves survivors. It helps keep survivors safe by ensuring that their personal information about where they currently are or what they're doing does not get in the hands of a batterer. And also, it strengthens the relationship between you as an advocate and the survivor by creating trust. When the survivor comes to you seeking help, they put their trust in you that you will not share their information with anyone else. And that is, for many survivors, why they are willing to share their story with you. If they thought that you would go tell their story to others, they would probably unlikely come to you for help. So it's important that you do not break that trust with the survivor. So what rule are you required to follow? In almost all cases, you will be following the Violence Against Women Act confidentiality rule. The Violence Against Women Act confidentiality rule prohibits you from sharing any information about a survivor unless one of 3 exceptions is present. Number 1, the survivor gives you permission to share their information. Number 2, a state statute such as mandatory reporting requires you to share information about a survivor. Or number 3, a court orders you to share a survivor's information. Only if one of those 3 things is present, then can you share information about a survivor. If not one of those 3 things has happened, then you cannot disclose any information about a survivor to anyone outside your program. One thing that is important to know, if you ever are required to share an information about a survivor without their permission, whether for mandatory reporting or a court order, you must immediately let the survivor know. And also, when you make the mandatory report or comply with the court order, only share as little information as necessary to meet the requirements under the reporting law or the court order. So that is the basic confidentiality law you are required to follow. It seems very short, but as you will learn in the coming weeks, there are lots of exceptions and other details that go into the Violence Against Women Act that make it complicated and make it necessary for us to have this course. Next week, you will learn all about how to get a survivor's permission to share their information, mandatory reporting, and court orders. And then in the following weeks, you will learn about what you're supposed to do if law enforcement wants information, or what you should do if you're working with minors, or how confidentiality and technology interact. So The Violence Against Women Act is very broad, and it does not provide specific details about how to approach every single situation that might come up as an advocate. Your program likely has its own confidentiality policies and procedures already drafted, and you should make sure you follow those at all times. Those policies will comply with the Violence Against Women Act, but they likely provide more detail and more specific steps that you need to follow in various situations. So make sure you know those policies and keep them with you throughout the course. Okay, we just have a few things we need you to do before week 2. First of all, there are a few handouts in the week 1 handout section. Please go read those. There's a few pages of the confidentiality guide as well as the Violence Against Women Act statute and rule. They are all very short, but will give you a lot more detail about what I just briefly went over. Secondly, go into the discussion portion of the Blackboard site and introduce yourself to the other folks in the class. And then finally, if you do not already have them, go to your supervisor and get your program's confidentiality policies and procedures, read them, and then post them to the Blackboard discussion site if you can. And once all the other folks in the class have posted their program's policies, go read the other program's confidentiality policies and see how they differ from your program. It will really give you a sense of how things can change from program to program, even though you're all following the same basic rule. All right, we will see you next week.